We did it. We did it. Answer Dave Brown. We did it. We did a show, late night Locked On Twins. We said, would the Twins sign someone before the new year? And lo and behold, they signed a free agent on Wednesday. Who was it? Well, I'm glad you asked. Hang out for just a second. This is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello again, friends. It's Brandon Warren. It's Locked On Twins. You can unfollow me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE. And thanks for making not only Locked On Twins your first listen every day, but Brandon Warren and Answer Dave Brown at Answer Dave Brown on Twitter. Dave, how are things this eve?
Things are busier than they've been because the Twins have added a player to their 40-man roster, a relief pitcher formerly of the Royals.
Yeah, big news, and we'll hit that momentarily here. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, also on YouTube, and as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, we're your team every day. We'd love for you to be active in the comments. We'll do our best to hang out. Plenty of comments on the most recent show, including someone saying that we absolutely nailed the timing of our most recent podcast episode and the subject therein. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. It's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Also, quick note, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with your local experts from Locked On and our national shows, which cover every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. That includes Locked On Minnesota, our friends over there. So Ron Johnson was a wide receiver for the Gophers, and he does the Locked On Minnesota, some Viking stuff, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But I actually won an auction for a football card of his. He played briefly in the NFL, and so I'm going to get him to autograph that. So that was kind of a fun little find. Our
little Christmassy moment.
Yeah. So see if I can get that autographed. Let's just dive right in, Dave Brown. Josh Staumont gets a big league deal from the Twins, about $1 million thereabouts, maybe $950, something like that, according to friend of the show, Dan Hayes from The Athletic. Staumont is coming off thoracic outlet syndrome surgery, which can be the death knell for most people who have it. Phil Hughes famously had it as a Twin. His career was never the same after, and a few other guys as well. Now, first and foremost, what do we need to know about Josh Staumont?
He throws really hard. He's he did before the thoracic outlet syndrome, but presumably he'll be able to throw like that again. Gets a lot of strikeouts. He's a little bit on the wild side as far as keeping the ball in the zone, but most of his career he's been pretty consistent at being able to get strikeouts and being able to get outs. His kind of the one outlier was, he only pitched like 20 innings last year and had the injury and had surgery, I want to say in July, which should give him enough time to recover.
You think?
He's only going on 30 years old. I think he just turned 30 this month, actually. He doesn't have a lot of, the tread isn't too worn on the tires. I'm a little surprised. Huh?
His birthday was almost a week ago, so good catch there.
Oh, right. So I'm a little surprised that the Royals, they did seem to sour on him quickly. I'm not sure why that was, because his first 3 years were really productive, especially his 2021 season. So I'm not sure if that means they're kind of worried about the specific nature of the thoracic outlet syndrome surgery that he had. There are two different kinds. One is has to do with the vein, and one has to do with something else. And it's a matter of, if for those who don't know, it's guys who work out too much or pitchers who throw too much, and develop muscle and so forth, and it sort of impinges on tendons and veins and that kind of thing in the shoulder area. Sometimes you have to have like a rib removed or bones removed, or it's kind of a scary sounding thing to get your circulation going. It's kind of a circulation issue. So the guys who get thoracic outlet syndrome, there's kind of a wide range of outcomes. I don't think it's necessarily like a death knell career, but you mentioned Phil Hughes and Steven Strasburg's probably a guy who is the most famous recent thoracic outlet dude, and he's kind of in the middle of sort of trying to retire. So,
by the way, he's that actually came out today. He's still fighting with the Nationals over money, which I don't know, bad form by the Nationals if you ask me, but
kind of typical for them too. So, I've seen some things like I saw Aaron Gleeman say it's not necessarily a good thing to see, that it could be a portend of bad things to come. If you look up a couple things about thoracic outlet syndrome, some studies that have been done, I don't know how much gravitas these studies have, but it isn't necessarily the end of the road. And like I said, this guy just turned 30, so it is a little curious that the Royals decided to let him go. I don't know exactly what that means, if that's something that's going to be like on them, or they know something that we don't. So it's an interesting signing for the Twins, and when healthy, he can be a late inning dude.
And it's not as simple as just unplugging the shoulder and then plugging it back in like an outlet. So that's a real shame. Sorry, that did not land.
That's a terrible analogy. This is a man's career, but no, I hadn't thought of that joke actually, Brandon. That's pretty funny though. It's a little different than that. It's sort of like getting in there and messing around with the wire that connects the outlet to the end of the plug. So it's a little more complicated than that, but as far as outlets go.
Yeah, one time I was in college and the internet was down because we were in a notoriously poor dorm for that, and I told one of the girls that I had used all the internet, and she got real mad. So yeah, not always as simple as it sounds. But what role, before we go to our first pause, if you were to kind of approximate his role, like who he'll replace in the bullpen, like on the high end, it might be like Emilio Pagan, and on the low end, just another guy. Is that probably about right?
Pagan was the first guy I was thinking of. Staumont's got good stuff, hit and miss stuff. Of course, this is all, with an asterisk, this is pre-surgery.
Yep.
But the kind of guy, a good team would look at it as a luxury, but kind of a good luxury to have in the 6th or 7th inning when there are people on base and you're trying to stop a rally and you need a strikeout. That's the kind of guy that you want Staumont to be. You don't. It's I suppose they prefer clean innings just because he does kind of have a little bit of a high walk ratio, but he's a guy that will kind of put some, if not fear, some worry into a batter's mind about striking out. So that's what he's good at. He's the kind of guy that can help the Twins get outs in the middle of a game in a tight situation and a higher leverage than at the end of the game. They have guys for that too. So he would be, ideally, that's what he's going to be.
I want to circle back to the thoracic outlet for a second here. Lucas Seehafer, who the writing that I've read from him is at Twins Daily, but he is a physical therapist and working on his PhD in kinesiology, had a couple interesting tweets on this. So he said, thoracic outlet syndrome is a notoriously difficult surgery to return from. Velo and performance decrease significantly following the procedure. However, there's little research differentiating vascular and neurological thoracic outlet. My understanding is that Staumont had the former. Theoretically, the vascular procedure should lend better outcomes, i.e. less velo and performance decreases, because the nerves aren't the structure that was getting pinched. So it frees up the blood vessels and blood flow returns to normal. Nerves control muscles, so outcomes are worse. In layman's terms, it sounds as though he had probably the lesser of two evils of the surgeries, near as I can tell. Lucas does a nice job laying it out. I'm just not that smart. But
no, when you talk about are we worried about nerve damage
Yeah.
versus? And I think I'm kind of over my skis here, but I think nerve damage is where Strasburg lands a little bit more than veins and other guts. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the issues that he's been having, and maybe why he is trying to retire if the Nationals will only let him. So it's easier. They're bigger, so it's easier to move muscle and veins around, and than it is to manipulate the nerves. It's still something. We don't live in the Star Trek times yet when the doctors seem to have all the answers. So that is if that is indeed true about Staumont, then that is better news than what the alternative could be.
Yeah, and his velo was down, but that's to be expected going into surgery. Let's take a quick second and give some love to our friends at FanDuel. We'll come back. I'll ask you a little bit more about Staumont because he's got some interesting things in his peripherals that, something to look at. Again, you sign a guy for $1 million. He's got another year of control after this if you choose to accept it. There's some things going on under the hood that might be interesting, but first, a message from FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Again, misery mitigation. If you do what I do, which is bet against your team, then your team wins or you win. And at FanDuel, that's a huge deal right now. It's $150 if your team wins. So if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time than now to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, overs, unders, and much, much more. And again, $150 if your team wins is just a $5 money line bet. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right, we're back into the bullpen here with Answer Dave Brown. Dave, have you had any interactions with Staumont while you've been covering? I know his career has been, he kind of came up just before the COVID era, and so things have really been jumbled, and you've moved around a little bit work-wise too. Do you have any inside knowledge? Good clubhouse guy, what he's all about?
Seemed like a good clubhouse guy. I had like 2 interactions with him in longer form interviews, and he struck me as very very thoughtful, a little zen, not wacky like life of the party wacky, but somebody who puts a little bit of extra thought into his answers. Whether they came out and made a lot of sense, I'm not exactly sure, but I think he's a guy who is somebody trying to find life's answers wherever they might lie, and is kind of an interesting guy to talk to in that way. And I would say a guy who's funny. I think most of the conversation that we had, as I recall, was about a willingness and sort of not having a choice, but to play hurt, to pitch hurt. That was sort of the context of the conversation, that he had some other minor injuries before. This was like a year ago or so. I think I talked to him last about it. And he had some minor injuries. And he's like, basically, most of the players that you see out there every day are injured in some form. And it is a matter of how much are they able to overcome? How much are they willing to overcome? But, it's sort of like an understanding on both sides that the teams are going to request that you pitch when you're not at 100%, and you're going to have to be able to deliver in some form, even if you are not feeling as good as you did, on your 18th birthday. So it's a guy who knows what the business is about, and not necessarily in a cynical way, but in a way that is kind of realistic. And so, he's a guy that's willing to put himself out there, even when he's not 100%. And, this is something that the Royals knew coming in. I don't know, I'm not sure like what, how he was leading up to this thoracic outlet injury,
Right.
What his attitude was like as far as that went. I don't know if there was something in it that, kind of turned the Royals off. But like I said before, going back to, I'm a little surprised that with his stuff that they let him go. he's a guy that seems to have a realistic outlook on what it takes to be a relief pitcher, and he's got really good stuff. And we'll see where this leads him next.
Yeah. So Fangraphs has his salary listed as $950K for 2024. I don't know if that must be formal, because I mean, I think John Becker, who we mentioned in the last program, is kind of their person who tracks down, hunts down contract details.
Yeah.
So for $950K, it kind of seems like the arm you'd want to keep around. Twins non-tendered Matt Whistler after a really nice 2020, though. So that's not to say that I know more than they do or anything like that. Interesting point you made, though, about pitching hurt and making you wonder if that attitude led to where he's at right now. But I want to gloss over a couple fun things on his Fangraphs, the top of his page. The prospects report, so I assume it was probably Eric Longenhagen at the time, gave him a 70 fastball, so on the 20-80 scale, a 70 curveball, and 30 command. Would that pretty much jive with what you've seen from him?
Yeah, I would say, he throws near the top of, or did throw near the top of human capability.
Yep.
He hit 100 miles an hour, had a big bending breaking ball, and a slider that sometimes he threw for strikes. So yeah, that matches up with, ideally what he was with the Royals in action, as opposed to just in possibility.
And it says on his graduation that he has had elite stuff since college, but has struggled to harness it at all into his mid-20s. He did for a stretch in 2020, which was a very good season for him. But if he can do that consistently, he'll be Nick Anderson. If not, he's Philippe Aumont, which I believe was a pitcher who was traded in the Cliff Lee Seattle Philly trade.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny that Staumont, I find myself questioning myself. Staumont and Aumont, literally it's just ST and then Philippe Aumont's last name. I think that was probably deliberate.
That could be deliberate or just something in the brain leading them to each other. I don't remember Philippe Aumont's stuff and how it relates to Josh Staumont.
Yeah,
but it's very possible that they threw similarly. I remember that Philippe was a prospect. That's really all I remember about him at this point. It's been a while. So
okay, so home runs haven't really been an issue for him.
It's the ball in the ballpark. He doesn't give up a lot of hits. Period. I mean, he's good at limiting extra base hits. He's good at not throwing home runs. It's a matter of can he throw? Is he going to throw enough pitches out of the strike zone to walk too many guys to get you into trouble?
Well, so, okay, home runs per 9, 1.86, which is insane, but that was 19 and a third innings in his rookie season. Then we go 0.70, 0.82, 0.72, 0.45. Magic number for me from a reliever is under 1. Starters is closer to 1, 2, 1, 3. But I think you want your relievers probably down under that 1 mark. Again, a lot of it's going to have to do with the leverage you put these pitchers into. But
true, and note Kansas City. It's hard to hit home runs in Kansas City. Still, it's not as hard as it used to be. So he was a guy that that's probably how they approach. They're like, hey, approach it like this. This is Kansas City. It's really hard for the other guy to hit a home run. All you got to do is throw strikes. It'll probably be an out. So that's probably what they. It's not going to be quite as cut and dried at Target Field.
Yeah. Well, what makes that interesting is his career ground ball rate is 35.5%. For people who don't know, 45 is about average. But in 20 innings this year, 47.9%. So a gigantic spike, almost 17, 18%. I think guys can, in some respects, tailor what they're capable of to their circumstances, whether it's you got a really good outfield defense or good infield defense, or you play in Colorado. 20 innings is not enough time for it to necessarily stabilize, I don't think. I'm not sure how quickly. Maybe it is enough time. But it does make me curious if that is something he's got in his back pocket where, he added he mixed in more sliders at the expense of his curveball. And maybe that's just a classification thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe he's going to try to be a ground ball guy. Twins Target Field plays spacious. If Byron Buxton is healthy, they've got a good outfield defense. I think he's in a good spot either way if the ground ball thing is for real or not. And even more to your point, though, was he's a career, like I said, 35.5%, and those home run rates have been low. So he's been able to, whether it's because the K is big and plays expansive, not expensive, never say that about the Royals. He seems to have figured out how to be a fly ball guy without giving up a bucket load of homers. And I think there's value in that.
For sure. It's and it's interesting. We'll see if it is if his better ground ball rate last year was just a blip, whether it was, and whether it had to do with him realizing that his velocity wasn't where it was, or his stuff wasn't, that he was pitching with some kind of injury, and so he had to make an adjustment, or if it's something that he learned irrespective of that. So obviously there's the questions that will be asked of him later on, but it is not a discouraging little bitty stat point.
His BABIPs are hysterical too. So again, if we're introducing people to these stats, I kind of want to explain a little bit, but it's batting average on balls in play. It helps you normalize, what kind of contact a pitcher gives up, where they've had some luck or good or bad. And these are his BABIPs. So 293, perfectly normal, 333, a little high, 236, which is hysterically low, 340, and then 306. What that comes out to is 289, which is perfectly in line with what you'd expect from a big league pitcher. But the circuitous path that he took to get there is, boy, that's something.
Well, I don't know for a fact that it shows this, but his stuff is just, it's so good and varied when it's right that, hitters are going to try and make those adjustments. And sometimes they're going to get it, and sometimes they're not. And, but the outcomes are going to be, still related somewhat to how good his stuff is. So even if, the batting average on balls in play goes up, maybe the contact isn't as pristine, and you can get outs that way. He's got great stuff. There's lots of indicators that show that he has great stuff. So it's an exciting acquisition from that standpoint, and we will see about the health and what can happen from there.
Yeah, velo is peaked in the 98 range, 99.3 when you threw a sinker a bit. But yeah, 98, 99, tickling 100, which is obviously good. And then his batting average against. Last thing I want to talk about before we do some news and notes and get out of here. 273. That first year, that 2019 is kind of a throwaway. He was a rookie. 215, 183, 253, 216. So again, if you can keep him in the strike zone, he should still be nasty even at 95, 96 like he was last year. Again, may not be the first guy out of the chute in the 8th inning or anything, but certainly not a guy who would hurt you if you need someone to, really get you out of a jam in let's say the 5th or 6th inning, and you need a strikeout. I mean, if you give up a walk and the thing snowball, it kind of is what it is, but you can get that strikeout. This is going to be your guy.
Yes, and a guy that gives you a little bit of an advantage there, maybe over some other teams, and maybe over other seasons that the Twins have had, as just a guy that can miss bats. If you need someone to miss a bat in the middle of a game in a tight squeeze, Staumont seems like a good guy above many others.
I feel like we're saying his name in all caps. Is that how you feel too? Like
shouting it?
Yeah.
From the rooftops. Well, we're very excited that the Twins have added a player that people have heard of. No doubt, if they've seen a Royals game, these past few years with the Twins, they know this guy comes in, before Barlow, basically in the last inning. Both those guys are gone now. So
I like Barlow too.
Yeah, it was that was a nice thing that the Royals had going. I mean, they were going to go 50 and 110, but if they were ahead in the 7th inning,
good chance.
So.
Yeah, no question about it. And, teams who were good last year and have bits and pieces to fill can make these kinds of signings. Twins fans tick just because they're ticked all the time, but it has to do with order of operations. Why are you signing a reliever when you need a starter and you need someone to back up Byron Buxton in center? Again, it doesn't matter. Order of operations does not matter. We did the list yesterday, and the first free agent signed varied position and varied need. It just, you kind of have to, the dance in the off season is just kind of you know, it plays out in front of you, and it doesn't mean you're going to get your best players first or anything like that.
Sometimes you got to backfill with
Yeah.
players who are better, just because that's how the market goes.
Couple news and notes before we bounce off here. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, who was a Twin for the better part of 24 hours, signing with the Blue Jays, who are flush with utility players. 2 years, $15 million. That seems a little high to me.
Well, yes, if you consider, and just off the top of my head, the Royals signed Garrett Hampson for, I think, a 1-year deal for much less money. I don't remember the total, but he's a guy. He's maybe not as good of a defensive player at shortstop as Kiner-Falefa, but it does seem like a lot, and it does seem like a lot of multi-positional players that the Blue Jays are adding. Now that's a fan base too that is probably worried, because why are you adding these middle infield, these multi-positional players, utility men, when the only kind of utility men we wanted was Shohei, and Shohei didn't work out. So it's everybody, every fan base faces similar type of worries. So it does seem like a strange addition and kind of backward, but like you said, there's still lots of free agents and trades to be made, but it seems like I can see where people are going to be underwhelmed.
$2 million for Hampson, who had actually a pretty respectable year for the Marlins last year. Getting guys out of Colorado, surprisingly not as bad as you'd think. I think DJ
it's a new market inefficiency, or whatever Moneyball concept you can apply. Hey, the Coors effect isn't so much like the home runs that you hit because it was Coors Field, but it's some kind of weird body decompression that happens when you leave Coors Field and then can't hit. It's a real thing with these hitters who are Rockies. They go on the road and they do worse than they would have if they were on a different team, because of Coors Field not being in their blood anymore. It is very hard to quantify, but it's. I asked Garrett Hampson about it, and he said it's real. It's hard to know exactly where it begins and where everything else ends, but you definitely feel it when you're a Rocky and you are not in Coors Field. So get those people away from there, and maybe they average out, they normalize.
Martin Maldonado's deal is announced as a $4 million salary for 2024 with an option that could vest for $4 million in 2025. I suspect that it won't as much have to do with how well Maldonado plays, but more along the lines of if Corey Lee or Edgar Cuero come along and can kind of take that spot. With that said, $4 million for a backup catcher, I mean, you could easily shuffle him to the background and it would be no big deal. But right around the kind of money he made with Houston, not a surprise there. And actually, for a team like the White Sox, a pretty interesting and good signing, even if he's not going to give them anything with the bat.
I do worry, as much as I worry about things, that his defense was not as good last year as it was in other years. And it's just sometimes defense, the metrics will look like that over a given season. And it was kind of a struggle, a taffy pull for the Astros all year. But Maldonado wasn't his normal defensive self as far as the numbers went last year. There was a big drop off. I don't know exactly why that is. I mean, that could be pitchers too. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes with the White Sox. And like you said, they have a minor leaguer who's maybe an up and comer that they got in the Giolito trade. So we'll see how soon that Edgar gets called up to the majors.
If I'm not mistaken, too, Corey Lee came over from the Astros. I mean, he's going to be familiar with Maldonado in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah. Well, Maldonado was kind of blocking him over there, but Lee is he's got a great arm and he's capable of hitting home runs, but it's like all those other things that catchers do, he sort of struggles with. So I'm not sure about pitch framing. I'm not sure about other kinds of offensive prowess. So, there was a reason why his star was limited and why he's, in his mid-20s, and the Astros really didn't give him a lot of run at the major league level. So we'll see exactly what it all adds up to with the White Sox. So far, it's not adding up to more than what the Royals have, or the Royals or certainly the Twins.
Yeah. I mean, they put up with Zach Collins for a while. They've had some
Oof.
catching prospects that they've tried to make things happen with. Yeah, I don't really think Corey Lee is viewing it as though this guy is coming to block me again. One of my favorite stories, and I'll end with this. So Garrett Jones, do you remember Garrett Jones?
Garrett Jones and I were born at the same hospital in the south suburbs of Chicago. So you're darn right. I know Garrett Jones.
Yeah, one of my favorite jokes is I was born in whatever city because I wanted to be close to my mother. Terrible.
That's how I felt. So
who did Garrett Jones come up with? The Twins.
Pirates.
No, the Twins.
Oh, you mean that come up? But
yes, he had his comeuppance was with the Pirates,
right? Yes.
But he was blocked by Justin Morneau with Pittsburgh.
I forgot about that, but yeah,
Pittsburgh traded for Justin Morneau. Justin Morneau signs with the Rockies, and it was funny because there was a rumor that Garrett Jones was on their radar too. And I'm just thinking, Garrett Jones has to be like, how do I get away from this Justin Morneau guy? Because he's just everywhere. Great guy, great broadcaster, but man, yeah, you got to feel a little snake bitten if you're Garrett Jones.
Is Garrett Jones trying to be a broadcaster somewhere now? Because that would be perfect if he was.
I think he follows me on Twitter. At least he did. Yeah. I don't like to check because sometimes people stop doing that. But I instruct them to at the beginning of the show, so it is what it is. Dave, thank you so much for hanging out. We'll be back probably tomorrow, but we'll see how the schedules look. Maybe there'll be I'm going to test our mettle here. Maybe there'll be another free agent signing for us to break down tomorrow at this time.
You're asking for a lot, but let's hope that the front office, the Twins front office, hears you.
Well, hey, thanks for hanging out with a little late night Locked on Twins. It was an absolute pleasure. Please give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're on. Thumbs up. Thank you, FTL Nova Kid on YouTube. Hit subscribe, all that great stuff. And for now, we're signing off, and we'll see you tomorrow night.